The moon called Velen 3 was beautiful in ways that most beings in the galaxy could not understand. Its forests glowed with soft blue and purple light. Its rivers sparkled like liquid silver under the great gas giant that hung forever in its sky. And its people, the Vellani, were gentle creatures who had never known war. The Vellani were tall and thin, with skin that changed colors based on their emotions. When they were happy, they glowed warm gold. When they were sad, they turned deep blue. They had lived on their moon for 10,000 years, building cities of crystal and growing food in gardens that sang with bioluminescent flowers. They had joined the Galactic Concord 300 years ago. The Concord was an alliance of the oldest and most powerful species in the galaxy. They promised protection to all member worlds. They promised peace and safety. The Vellani had believed them. That belief died on a cold morning when the sky turned black. Tiri was young for a Vellani, only 40 years old. She worked in the great observatory on the highest mountain of Velen 3, watching the stars and recording their movements. She loved her work. The universe was so vast and so beautiful, and she felt lucky to spend her life studying it. But on that morning, the stars disappeared. One by one, they went dark. Not because they had died, but because something was blocking them. Something huge. Something hungry. The hollow swarm had arrived. Every species in the galaxy knew about the hollow swarm. They were not truly alive, not in any way that made sense. They were like a disease that had learned to build ships. They moved from world to world, consuming everything. They ate metal and rock and water and flesh. They left nothing behind but empty husks floating in dead space that no one knew where they came from. No one knew how to stop them permanently. The only defense was to fight them until they decided the cost was too high and moved on to easier prey. Tiri watched her screens with growing horror as the swarm fleet grew larger and larger in her sensors. 300 ships, then 500, then 1,000. They blocked out the stars like a spreading stain of darkness. She ran to the communication center and sent an emergency message to the Galactic Concord. Her fingers shook as she typed. Her skin had turned pale white with fear. "This is Velen 3, she transmitted. "The hollow swarm has entered our system. We request immediate military assistance. Please help us, please." The response came 6 hours later. Tiri had not slept. She had not eaten. She had just sat in front of the communication screen, watching the swarm ships move closer and closer to her world. The message was from the Concord High Council. It was written in formal diplomatic language, but its meaning was simple and brutal. The Vellani were not worth saving. The message explained that the Concord had analyzed the strategic value of Velen 3. The moon had no rare resources. Its population was small. Its technology was not advanced enough to contribute to the Concord's military strength. The cost of sending a defense fleet would be greater than the value of what would be saved. Therefore, the Concord regretted to inform the Vellani that their membership was being revoked. They were now classified as a closed quarantine zone. No Concord ship would enter their system. No Concord species would offer them aid. The message ended with a formal expression of sympathy for their situation. Tiri read the message 3 times. She could not believe it. She refused to believe it. They had paid their membership dues for 300 years. They had followed every rule. They had done everything right. And now they were being left to die because they were not important enough. Elder Council leader Miro received the news with a heavy heart. He was old, nearly 200 years, and he had led his people through many difficulties. But he had never faced anything like this. He called a meeting of all the Vellani elders. They gathered in the Crystal Hall, their colors shifting through shades of blue and gray as they processed the terrible news. "What can we do?" asked Elder Sona, her voice trembling. We have no weapons. We have no warships. We do not even understand how to fight. We could hide, suggested Elder Pava. Go underground. Wait for the swarm to pass. The swarm does not pass, said Miro quietly. They consume. They will dig into our world until nothing remains. Silence fell over the hall. The Villani had no answer. They had spent 10,000 years building a civilization of peace and beauty. They had never needed to learn violence. And now that peaceful nature would be their death. Tiri stood in the back of the hall, listening. She was not an elder, so she had no right to speak. But she could not accept this. She could not just sit and wait to die. She slipped out of the hall and returned to the observatory. The swarm was 3 days away now. 3 days until the end of everything she had ever known. She sat at her communication station and began scanning frequencies. The Concord had abandoned them, but the Concord was not the entire galaxy. There were other species out there. Species that were not part Alliance. Species that the Concord looked down upon. For hours, she searched. Most frequencies were empty. Some carried old automated messages from dead civilizations. Some were just static . And then she found something strange . It was a broadcast on a frequency she had never encountered before. The language was unfamiliar, but a translator worked to decode it. The message was simple, repeated on a loop. This is the United Earth Exploration Fleet. We come in peace. If any species requires assistance, please respond on this frequency. We are here to help. Tiri stared at the message. United Earth. She had never heard of them. They were not in any Concord database. They were nobody. They were nothing. But they were asking if anyone needed help. Her fingers hovered over the transmission controls. It was foolish. A species powerful enough to fight the swarm would not be unknown. These humans were probably primitive, barely spacefaring, utterly incapable of making any difference. But they were the only ones who had asked. Tiri pressed the transmission button. Her skin flickered with desperate hope as she spoke. This is Tiri of Velen 3. The Hollow Swarm is coming. The Galactic Concord has abandoned us. We have 3 days before they reach our world. Please, if you can hear this, we need help. We need anyone. She released the button and waited. The stars continued to disappear behind the approaching darkness, and somewhere, impossibly far away, a human ship received her message. Captain Park Do-Hin was drinking cold coffee when the message arrived. He was a tall man with tired eyes and gray hair at his temples, though he was only 42 years old. Command aged a person quickly, especially in the deep black of unexplored space. His ship, the Endurance, was an exploration vessel. It was not built for war. It was built to find new worlds, make contact with new species, and expand humanity's understanding of the galaxy. Do-Hin had spent 15 years doing exactly that. He had also spent 15 years being rejected by the Galactic Concord. Humanity had discovered faster-than-light travel 80 years ago. They had spread across a dozen star systems, built colonies, and reached out to the wider galaxy with hope and excitement. They had expected to find allies. They had expected to find friends. Instead, they had found the Concord. The ancient species of the Concord had looked at humanity and seen something dangerous. Humans were too emotional, they said. Too aggressive. Too unpredictable. They fought wars among themselves. They let passion guide their decisions instead of logic. They were, in the polite words of a Concord diplomat, not yet mature enough for galactic civilization. Humanity's application for membership had been rejected 7 times, but Do-Hin did not think about politics very often. He thought about his crew, his mission, and the endless wonder of the stars. He thought about the next discovery waiting just beyond the horizon. He was thinking about none of these things when Lieutenant Commander Bay Sunwoo burst into his quarters. "Captain," Sunwoo said, his usually calm face showing real emotion. "You need to hear this." Sunwoo was the tactical officer of the Endurance. He was younger than Dohyun, with sharp features and sharper instincts. In the 3 years they had served together, Dohyun had never seen him look so shaken. They went to the communication center, where Dr. Choi Yuna was already waiting. Yuna was the ship's xenobiologist, a small woman with curious eyes who had dedicated her life to understanding alien species. She looked at Dohyun with an expression he could not read. "Play it," Dohyun said. The message filled the room. A voice, clearly alien but translated into Korean by the ship's computer, spoke with desperate hope. "This is Thierry of Volon 3. The Hollow Swarm is coming. The Galactic Concorde has abandoned us. We have 3 days before they reach our world. Please, if you can hear this, we need help. We need anyone." Silence followed. Dohyun stood very still. He knew about the Hollow Swarm. Every spacefaring species knew about them. They were death-given form. They were the reason entire civilizations had vanished from the galaxy. "How far?" he asked quietly. 18 hours at maximum speed," Sunwoo replied. "But Captain, we're an exploration ship. We have defensive weapons, not offensive ones. We have a crew of 64, not a military fleet. I know what we have." Yuna stepped forward. "The Volani are a peaceful species. Level 2 civilization, no military capability at all. If the swarm has targeted them..." She did not finish the sentence. She did not need to. Dohyun thought about the message. He thought about the fear in that alien voice. He thought about what it meant to send a plea into the darkness, hoping that someone, anyone, would answer. "Contact Earth Command," he said. "Priority channel." Admiral Yoon Jisoo received the message in her office on Luna Base. She was 60 years old, with white hair cut short and a face that showed every battle she had ever fought. She had risen through the ranks during humanity's expansion years. When every new system brought new dangers, she had also lost people she loved to those dangers. 20 years ago, her daughter had been on a colony world called Haven's Rest. Pirates from a Concorde member species had raided the colony. Jisoo had begged the Concorde for help. They had refused. The pirates were technically an internal matter for their species to handle. By the time human ships arrived, Haven's Rest was burning. Her daughter never came home. Jisoo listened to the message from Volon 3. She listened to Captain Do-hyun's report. She thought about the Concorde's warning that had already arrived. Any species that entered a closed quarantine zone would be permanently banned from Concorde space. Then she made her decision. "How many ships can we send?" She asked her staff. "Admiral, the Concorde has warned us." "I did not ask about the Concorde. I asked how many ships we can send." The answer came reluctantly. 12. Humanity could spare 12 ships. It was everything they had available. Every vessel not already committed to essential duties. 12 ships against the Hollow Swarm. Jisoo nodded slowly. "Send them all." "Admiral, this could mean war with the Concorde. Let me worry about the Concorde." She stood up and walked to the window. Earth hung in the black sky, blue and beautiful. Those people asked for help. They asked if anyone was listening. We cannot call ourselves human if we pretend we did not hear. The fleet assembled in record time. 12 ships of various sizes, crewed by volunteers who understood they might not come home. Captain Do-hyun was given command of the combined force, the Endurance leading the way. Sergeant Han Min-jae was aboard one of the support vessels. He was a Marine, a ground fighter, with 20 years of service and scars to prove it. When he heard about the mission, he had volunteered immediately. Why? His commander had asked. "This is likely a one-way trip." Min-jae had shrugged. "Someone has to go." Might as well be someone who knows how to fight. Engineer Kang Yoonji was aboard the Endurance itself. She was young, only 28, but she was brilliant with ship systems. She could make machines do things their designers never imagined. She had volunteered because, in her words, the math says we'll probably die. I want to see if we can change the math. The fleet jumped to faster than light speed. 18 hours to Velen 3. 18 hours to reach a world that the entire galaxy had abandoned. On the Endurance, Do-hyun stood on the bridge and watched the stars stretch into lines of light. Sun-woo approached him. Captain, I've been running tactical simulations. With 12 ships against the estimated swarm force, our survival probability is less than 4%. I know. Permission to speak freely, sir? Always. Sun-woo was quiet for a moment. Then he said, my grandmother used to tell me stories about the old wars on Earth. She said that sometimes winning wasn't the point. Sometimes the point was just showing up. Being there. Not letting someone face the darkness alone. Dawn nodded. Your grandmother was wise. She was stubborn, Sun-woo said with a faint smile. She said that was the same thing. Far ahead, a small moon circled a gas giant. On that moon, a young Vellani named Tiri watched her. Screams and waited for an answer that she did not truly believe would come. She did not know that 12 ships were racing toward her. She did not know that 6,400 humans had just chosen to die for strangers. She only knew that the darkness was getting closer, and hope was all she had left. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light speed at the edge of the Velen system. Captain Do-hyun stood on the bridge of the Endurance and looked at his screens. What he saw made his stomach turn cold. The hollow swarm was massive. Over 1,000 ships of twisted black metal, each one covered in spines and tendrils that seemed to move on their own. They hung in space like a cloud of poison, slowly drifting toward the beautiful moon that glowed blue and purple in the distance. They're bigger than the report said. Lieutenant Commander Sun-woo muttered. Reports are always optimistic, Do-hyun replied. How long until they reach the planet? 14 hours. Maybe less. 14 hours. They had 14 hours to do something impossible. Do-hyun opened a channel to the entire fleet. All ships, this is Captain Park. We knew what we were flying into. Nothing has changed. Our mission is to protect the people of Velen 3 for as long as we can. Every minute we buy them is another minute for evacuation. Every life we save matters. Hold your positions and wait for my command. He closed the channel and turned to Dr. Yuna. I need to go down to the surface. I need to meet these people and tell them we're here. I'm coming with you, Yuna said immediately. They need to see that we mean no harm. A xenobiologist will help with that. Sergeant Min-jae's voice came over the communication system. Sir, I'd like to bring a squad of Marines as well. Not to fight, but to help with evacuation. We've trained for disaster response. Do-hyun nodded even though Min-jae could not see him. Granted. Meet me at the shuttle bay in 10 minutes. The shuttle descended through the atmosphere of Velen 3. Do-hyun looked out the window and saw the glowing forest below. The silver rivers, the crystal cities that sparkled in the light of the gas giant above. It was the most beautiful world he had ever seen, and it was about to be destroyed. They landed in the central plaza of the largest city. A crowd had already gathered. The Vellani stood in nervous clusters, their skin shifting through colors of fear and confusion. They had never seen humans before. They did not know what to expect. Do-hyun stepped out of the shuttle first. He held his hands out to show they were empty. Behind him came Yuna, Min-jae, and a dozen Marines. All of them moved slowly and carefully. An old Vellani stepped forward from the crowd. His skin was deep blue with grief, but he held himself with dignity. I am Elder Miro, he said through the translator. You are. The ones who answered our message? I am Captain Park Do-hyun of the United Earth Fleet. We received your distress call. We came to help. Whispers spread through the crowd. Terry pushed her way to the front, her eyes wide. You actually came, she breathed. I did not think. I did not believe. We came, Do-hyun confirmed. We have 12 ships. It's not much, but it's everything we could bring. Elder Miro's skin flickered with confusion. 12 ships against the swarm? That is suicide. Why would you do this? We are strangers to you. We have nothing to offer. The Concord itself has abandoned us. Why would you throw away your lives for us? Dr. Yuna stepped forward. She was small compared to the Villani, but her voice was steady and warm. Because you asked. And where we come from, you don't leave someone behind just because saving them is hard. The words hung in the air. The Villani did not seem to understand them. For 300 years, they had lived under the Concord's rules. Resources were allocated by value. Protection was given based on strategic importance. Everything had a price, and the price had to be worth paying. The idea that someone would help simply because help was needed. It was alien to them. More alien than the humans themselves. Terry began to cry. Her tears glowed softly in the dim light, leaving trails of gold down her cheeks. We cannot fight, she said. We do not know how. We have nothing to give you. We can only thank you. Sergeant Min-jae knelt down to meet her eyes. He was a hard man with a hard face, but his voice was gentle. You don't need to fight. You don't need to give us anything. What you need to do is survive. Can you do that? Can you help your people survive? Terry wiped her tears and nodded slowly. Good. Min-jae stood up and addressed the crowd. We need to evacuate as many people as possible to underground shelters. The swarm attacks from above. If we can get your people deep underground, they have a chance. Where are your shelters? Elder Miro answered. We have old mining tunnels beneath the mountains. They go very deep, but they were abandoned centuries ago. They are not prepared for habitation. Then we prepare them. Right now, every person who can work needs to start moving supplies underground. Food, water, medical equipment, everything. We don't have much time. The Villani looked at each other. They were not used to taking orders. They were not used to urgency or crisis. But something in Minja's voice, something in the way the humans moved with purpose and determination, sparked something in them. They began to organize. Do-hyun returned to the Endurance, leaving Min-jae and his Marines on the surface to coordinate the evacuation. On the ship, engineer Kang Yoonji was already working on a plan. The swarm uses a hive mind connection, she explained, showing Do-hyun her calculations. They coordinate through some kind of biological signal network. If we can disrupt that signal, we can confuse them, make them less coordinated. Can we do that? Maybe. The Villani have some amazing biotechnology. Their cities literally grow from living crystal. If I can interface their systems with ours, we might be able to create an interference field. It won't stop the swarm, but it might slow them down. Do it. Yoonji nodded and hurried away. Do-hyun watched her go, feeling a strange mix of pride and sorrow. His crew was so young. They had so much life ahead of them, and they were spending it for strangers who could not even understand why. On the surface, Terry worked alongside the human Marines. She carried supplies through the streets, directed her people toward the mountain tunnels, and translated orders between species. Her fear had not disappeared, but it had changed. It was no longer the fear of dying alone. It was the fear of losing people who had become precious. She watched Sergeant Min-jae organize the evacuation with calm efficiency. She watched Dr. Yuna tend to injured Villani with gentle hands. She watched humans lift burdens too heavy for Volani shoulders and carry them without complaint. "Why?" she asked Yuna during a brief rest. "Why do you do this? You could have ignored my message. You could have stayed safe." Yuna smiled. It was a sad smile, but also warm. "There's a saying among my people. The measure of a civilization is how it treats its weakest members. The Concord measures value. We measure character. And we decided a long time ago that we would rather die being who we are than live being who we're not." Tiri did not fully understand, but she understood enough. Hours passed. The evacuation continued. The swarm drew closer. And in the darkness of space, 12 human ships prepared to face 1,000. The hollow swarm attacked at dawn. Captain Do-Yun watched from the bridge of the Endurance as 1,000 enemy ships broke formation and rushed toward his tiny fleet. They moved like angry insects, swarming and swirling in patterns that seemed random but were actually perfectly coordinated. "All ships engage," he said calmly. "Remember, we're not trying to win. We're trying to buy time. Make every second count." The human fleet opened fire. Space lit up with weapons fire. Missiles streaked across the void. Energy beams cut through the darkness. The first wave of swarm ships exploded, then the second, then the third. But for every ship destroyed, 10 more took its place. The swarm returned fire. Their weapons were different from anything humans had faced before. They shot streams of black liquid that ate through metal like acid. They launched swarms of smaller craft that attached to ships and began drilling through the hull. The human destroyer Braveheart was the first to fall. Its captain, a young woman from Seoul named Lieutenant Seo Haran, kept firing until the very end. Her last transmission was simple: "Tell my family I love them. Keep fighting." Do-Hyun heard her words and felt them burn into his heart. But he could not mourn. Not yet. Not while the battle continued. "Rotate formation," he ordered. "Damaged ships fall back, fresh ships move forward. Keep the pressure on them." Lieutenant Commander Sunwoo was at the tactical station, his fingers flying across the controls. "Captain, we're losing ships faster than predicted. At this rate, we'll be destroyed in 3 hours. How's the evacuation going?" 60% of the Volani population is underground. They need at least 4 more hours to get everyone to safety. 4 hours. They had 3. On the surface of Velen 3, Sergeant Minjae felt the ground shake as pieces of debris fell from the sky. The battle above was visible even through the atmosphere, flashes of light like distant lightning in a storm of death. "Keep moving," he shouted to the Volani streaming toward the mountain tunnels. "Don't stop. Keep moving." Tiri was beside him, helping to guide her people. Her skin had gone pale with exhaustion, but she refused to rest. "How long do we have?" she asked. "Long enough," Minjae lead. "Just keep them moving." Engineer Yoonji's voice came through his communicator. "Sergeant, the interference field is ready. It should confuse the swarm's coordination for about 20 minutes. Tell the captain." Minjae relayed the message. On the Endurance, Do-Hyun nodded grimly. "Deploy the interference field on my mark," he ordered. "All ships, when the field activates, hit them with everything you have. This is our chance to do maximum damage. Ready, Captain." Mark. The interference field spread out from the Volani cities like an invisible wave. It struck the swarm fleet, and suddenly their perfect coordination shattered. Ships crashed into each other. Attack runs fell apart. The swirling patterns became chaos. "Fire!" Do-Hyun commanded. The human fleet unleashed everything they had. In 20 glorious minutes, they destroyed more swarm ships than they had in the previous 3 hours. Explosions bloomed across space like flowers of destruction, but 20 minutes was not enough. The swarm adapted. Their hive mind found new frequencies, new ways to coordinate. The chaos ended, and the attack resumed with renewed fury. The destroyer Soul's pride fell. Then the frigate Northern Star. Then the cruiser Eternal Spring. One by one, the human ships died in fire and silence. Do-hyun's own ship was hit. The Endurance shuddered as a swarm weapon tore through its side. Alarms screamed. Crew members were thrown from their stations. Damage report. Do-hyun shouted. Hull breach on decks 7 through 9. Engineering is offline. We've lost main weapons. A piece of debris struck Do-hyun, throwing him against the bulkhead. Pain exploded through his shoulder. He felt blood running down his arm. Sunwoo was at his side immediately. Captain! You're injured. I'm fine. Do-hyun pushed himself to his feet. Status of the fleet? 4 ships remaining, sir. All damaged. We have maybe 30 minutes left. 30 minutes. And the evacuation still was not complete. Do-hyun closed his eyes. He thought about his crew. He thought about the Villani hiding underground. He thought about Admiral Jisoo, who would send them here knowing they might not return. Then he thought about a desperate gambit. Lieutenant Commander Sunwoo, I'm transferring command to you. Sir, our reactors can be overloaded. If we set all remaining ships on collision courses with the swarm fleet and detonate our reactors simultaneously, we can create an electromagnetic pulse large enough to devastate their entire force. Sunwoo understood immediately. His face went pale. Captain, that would kill everyone still on the ships. I know, but it would also destroy the swarm. It would save the Villani. It would mean something. Sunwoo stood very still for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. I'll inform the other captains. But before he could move, the sensor officer shouted in surprise. Captain! New contacts dropping out of FTL. Multiple ships coming in fast. Do-hyun's heart sank. More swarm reinforcements. It was over. Then the sensor officer's voice changed. It filled with wonder and disbelief. Sir, they're not swarm. They're Concord ships. No, wait. They're from different species. 17 different species. And they're all targeting the swarm. Do-hyun limped to the main screen. What he saw there made him forget his pain. Dozens of ships were pouring out of faster-than-light travel. Ships of every shape and size, from species he recognized and species he did not. They were not flying in formation. They were not coordinated. But they were all firing at the hollow swarm with everything they had. A transmission came through. The voice was alien, translated by the computer into rough Korean. Human fleet. This is the combined volunteer fleet of the Forgotten. We saw your stand. We saw you choose death over abandonment. We could not let you face this alone. We are here. We are with you. Sunwoo stared at the screen. Captain, I don't understand. Where did they come from? Why would they help? Do-hyun felt tears running down his face. He did not wipe them away. Because they watched, he said softly. They watched us fly into death for strangers, and they remembered what it felt like to be abandoned. They remembered what it meant to be forgotten. The battle turned. The swarm, caught between the human survivors and the new fleet, faltered. Their coordination broke again, this time permanently. The combined firepower of 17 species tore through their ranks. For the first time in centuries, the hollow swarm retreated on the surface of Velen 3. Tiri looked up at the sky and saw the darkness receding. She saw the stars returning, one by one, and she wept with joy. The Battle of Velen 3 was over, but its echoes would reshape the galaxy. Captain Do-hyun stood in the medical bay of the Endurance. His shoulder wrapped in bandages. Dr. Yuna had done her best with limited supplies. But he would carry a scar for the rest of his life. He did not mind. Scars meant you had survived. Of the 12 ships that had come to save the Volani, only 3 remained. The Endurance, barely functional. The frigate Winter's Dawn, missing half its hull. And the transport vessel Kindred Spirit, which had somehow survived by hiding behind the wreckage of its sister ships. Over 2,000 humans had died in the battle. 2,000 people who had volunteered to fight for strangers. 2,000 families on Earth who would never see their loved ones again. But the Volani had survived. All of them. Every single person who had fled to the underground tunnels had lived. The evacuation had been completed with minutes to spare, and the combined fleet had driven the swarm away before they could dig into the moon. Lieutenant Commander Sunwoo stood beside Doyen, looking out the medical bay window at the ships floating around them. The volunteer fleet had stayed. 17 species, dozens of ships, all refusing to leave until they knew the humans were safe. Who are they? Dohyun asked quietly. They call themselves the Forgotten, Sunwoo explained. Minor species mostly. Worlds that were abandoned by the Concord during various crises over the centuries. Some lost colonies to pirates. Some were threatened by natural disasters and denied evacuation help. Some were simply declared strategically worthless and ignored. And they came for us? They came because of us, sir. They said they watched our fleet on every sensor frequency in the galaxy. They saw us flying towards certain death for a species we had never met. They said it reminded them of what the galaxy was supposed to be. Do-hyun closed his eyes. He thought about the messages he would have to send. The letters to families. The reports to Admiral Jisoo. The explanations. To a humanity that would want to know why their sons and daughters had died so far from home. But he also thought about Tiri, about the way she had looked at him when the battle ended, about the color of hope returning to her skin. It was worth it. All of it was worth it. On Earth, Admiral Yoon Jisoo received the news with tears in her eyes. She had expected to lose everyone. She had expected to spend the rest of her life wondering if she had made the right choice. Instead, she had proof. Proof that humanity's nature, the very thing the Concord called dangerous and unstable, was exactly what the galaxy needed. She prepared her response. The Galactic Concord called an emergency session. The High Council was furious. Humanity had violated their quarantine. They had interfered in matters beyond their jurisdiction. They had encouraged other species to break Concord law. Admiral Jisoo's transmission reached them before they could issue any punishment. She appeared on screens across the galaxy. A tired old woman with white hair and iron eyes. She spoke in a voice that carried the weight of every loss she had ever suffered, every injustice she had ever witnessed. You taught the galaxy that the weak are disposable. You taught species to calculate the value of lives before deciding who deserves to live. Today, humanity taught it something else. When someone cries for help, you answer. Not because it is easy, not because it is profitable, because that is what it means to be worth saving yourselves. She paused, letting her words settle into the silence. You denied us membership because we are too emotional, too aggressive, too willing to fight for things that cannot be measured in resources and strategic value. You were right. We are all of those things, and we will never apologize for it. The people of Vellum 3 live today because humans died for them. We ask nothing in return. We demand nothing from you. But we want the galaxy to know, as long as humanity exists, no one will be forgotten. No one will be left behind. And if the Concord tries to stop us, we will treat you exactly as we treated the swarm. The transmission ended. The Concord did not respond. There was nothing they could say. In the weeks that followed, the galaxy changed. The Volani formally requested to become a protectorate of Earth. They were the first, but not the last. 12 other species, all of them former victims of Concord abandonment, made the same request within the year. A new alliance formed. They called it the Covenant of the Forgotten. It was not based on strategic value or resource calculations. It was based on a single, simple principle. No one gets left behind. Humanity led not through strength, but through character. They were still small. They were still young. They were still far weaker than the ancient powers of the Concord. But they were something the Concord could never be. They were worthy of trust. Tiri became the first Volani ambassador to Earth. She traveled to humanity's homeworld on a diplomatic ship, watching through the windows as the blue and green planet grew larger and larger. It was beautiful, she thought. Not in the same way as Velen 3, but beautiful nonetheless. She landed in a city called Seoul. Millions of humans came to see her, waving and cheering. They treated her like a hero, though she had done nothing heroic. She was just a young woman who had sent a message into the darkness. A reporter asked her why she had trusted the humans, why she had believed that unknown strangers would come to save her people. Tiri thought about the question for a long time. Then she answered. They were the only ones who answered. And they were the only ones who asked if we were afraid. Captain Dohian returned to Earth as well, though he refused all honors and medals. He said he was just a man who had done his job. The real heroes, he insisted, were the ones who did not come home. He visited the families of every crew member who had died. He sat with them. He cried with them. He told them stories about their loved ones, about their bravery and their sacrifice. They saved an entire civilization, he told each family. Because of them, millions of people will live. Generations will be born who would never have existed. That is their legacy. That is what they gave the universe. It was small comfort, but it was true comfort. Sergeant Minjay stayed on Velen 3 to help with reconstruction. The Valani loved him. They called him the Gentle Warrior because he had taught them to survive without teaching them to hate. Engineer Yunji received a promotion and a new ship. She spent the rest of her career designing systems that could protect the weak from the strong. Her inventions saved thousands of lives across dozens of worlds. Dr. Yuna wrote a book about the Valani, about their culture and their kindness and their courage. It became the most widely read book in human history, translated into every language on Earth and eventually into hundreds of alien languages as well. And the galaxy watched. They watched as humanity did what the Concord said was impossible. They watched as a species too young and too emotional and too aggressive became the conscience of the stars. They watched as the forgotten found hope and as the powerful found shame. The hollow swarm would return someday. Other threats would rise. The galaxy would face darkness again and again, as it always had. But now, something was different. Now, when the darkness came, someone would answer. Someone would always answer, because that was what it meant to be human.